Tu es sacerdo. I'd like to approach today the subject of storytelling in opera compositions. I'd love to talk about Verdi because I'm obviously madly obsessed with him. Of course, what we're talking about here is not actually the text, the libretto. I'd like to talk about the composition itself, the music, and how in various operas very good composers manage to paint in a multi-dimensional way those lines of character. It's as if they could paint the wrinkles on the subjects. And if you take the witches, for instance, and how they're depicted, and their impatience and their patience and their calculating cunning, their the way they conceive Macbeth, and how they salute him. In Macbeth, Verdi actually takes upon himself to paint the horses galloping towards the impending victim of murder. Banquo is trembling and hiding, and all the landscape and the bushes, the hiding places, the ground underneath the hoofs of those horses are actually suggested in the score. So of course you have those accents and those jumping sequences and those jumping breaths in the soldiers singing. When you look at the score and you actually sing in a chorus, you understand better what I mean by that, because it's really not just what the notes are saying, it's all the accents and all the crescendos and the subito and the subiti, I think. Of course, after that you've got the tremor with the strings, clearly depicting the fear and the vulnerability, the ultimate vulnerability in front of his death, as in some scene in a film by Alfred Hitchcock. The images are very impacting, very brutal, very cartoon-like. You can compare the atmosphere and the frankness of the images to Tom and Jerry, almost, except it's much more demanding emotionally to the listener, as far as listener is concerned, more involving. What I do like about those great writers is that they do take time to mention a lot of detail in the emotional landscape. Mozart, Verdi, Beethoven. I have great respect for their work because it's such a contrast with what one can see nowadays, of course, but also there's really nothing like it. And so opera, in my view, can help many students of just about any subject learn better, because there's so much attention to detail. And if you sing in a choir, for instance, play an instrument, you have to look at the detail. Of course, it's going to stimulate your mind mathematically and artistically, logically, as well as emotionally, because you're going to have something to emulate, and you're going to have some greater big example of humanity and painting that you could look at and examine. And if you're standing in front of a great big impressive painting, you're gonna open your mind and you're gonna stretch your mind to understand how it's done. And so you're gonna have something else to look up to, and your values are gonna be a bit higher, your standards in quality. And I believe that could spread to not just musical areas, but just about anything as far as humanities and human knowledge, including mathematics or languages, are concerned. Tu es sacerdo in eterno. And of course, opera as an artwork and a pleasure to listen to can be a great set of stimuli with regards knowing better about society and discovering new structures in communication between groups of human beings, and not just opera, of course. I'm talking about great compositions such as great masses and great choruses, immense opportunities for identification, and also purely on the aesthetic journey point of view, you do have a lot of opportunities to escape and visualize beauty and identify to beauty. Those notes just will be something that as human beings we will identify to subconsciously. I would like to come back to the opera description I was doing earlier, and sometimes I'm very amused at Verdi's sense of humor. I mean, it is so full of it when it comes to describing scenes. It's so over the top. And when you have something like Aida with all the cymbals and the trumpets, it's like you almost want to tell him to sort of stop adding so much. But it's, you know, it takes a genius to actually add so much pompous extra camp detail on every arrival in every palace. Just slam cymbals and slam brass at you and still get away with it. I mean, it's like a big designer designing some kind of creating some kind of bridal dress or red carpet dress, and really adding loads of details and like plastic bits to it, and loads of impossible equilibrium, sort of daring attempts at creating something impossible for gravity's sake. And this guy gets away with it. And some creators of fashion do that because they're brilliant minds, and it takes a massive genius to do it in such a constructive way and still get away with murder. As Verdi, when it comes to a musical structure which involves 11, 10, 20 voices, including orchestra. I'm not sure which is best to describe Verdi's genius when it comes to painting people. I mean, I always think of the arrival of the witches with the whistling sounds and the flights. All these descriptions, I mean, there is no way that's depicted in Shakespeare's text. And of course, Verdi brings that up, and the way they slow down to talk and to rise in front of Banquo. The horn, the single horn accompanying it, as in some kind of impending either danger or some masculinity or another coming up, while this woman is having announcing itself to some bloke who's so ambitious he thinks he's the next king of Scotland. A female mocking him. I always find it fascinating to watch also the way they arrive with such fancy and such playfulness. I mean, this is typical Disney, with all the high-pitched sound of those mouse-like creatures. Just very light movement, but very sharp and very teasing in the personality of the notes. I find it an absolute immense source of inspiration. Graphically, there is nothing quite like a Verdi score. What was Verdi trying to do? Confuse the mind of the listeners, confuse the mind of that bloke standing there and whoever was standing in their way. Because they were supposed to be thinking like spirits and thinking faster than everybody else. So it's very much depicted in the way they speak and they sing, and every single spitting consonant is precise and very impossible to follow, just like their flight and their spiritual power. Those are just a few insights I wanted to share. I understand there are so many musical styles all over the world, and being black, you hear a lot of crap. Actually, people think that being black and listening to opera is actually pretentious, it's presumptuous. I don't know where that comes from, because as I've discussed in other videos, I think, I mean, this is so multicultural. the beats and the personalities and the humanity contained in those in the society patterns, in the notes and the scores. I mean, this is, I don't know, you have to be Chinese or white or black, I don't know what kind of rubbish this is, but see there. I very much like samba, and I very much like Cuban music, and I love Arabic dance, and I love music zouk for my country. I mean the good zouk, not the recent one, I'm sorry, but the proper zouk from the 80s and 90s. And I believe, and have found, some beats are actually quite similar to those structures which are called world music, quite patronizingly by some people, in opera, even in oratorio. I mean, don't get me started, Mozart. And so I quite like sharing this and discussing this. This is just a little window, but there is so much more to say, obviously. I hope this is a journey which can be undertaken by many, many people. And I think some young people could actually and should take once a month, half an hour to go to the library together and listen to some music by Handel or Mozart, and ask the teacher for recommendations for stuff they could listen to, and look out for the cinematography and the sentimentality, whatever stuff they could identify to in whatever music piece they were given to listen to. And I think that would make a much better world, because people from a young age would listen out for things, details, and listen and learn a new language, a new vocabulary in music, digest all this information subconsciously and listen out for beats better. And also I believe they could listen out to each other in that way better, by listening out to musical structures. My website is midnightnotebook.com, midnightnotebook.com.